Hello there, Brick Fanatics. The LEGO Group has approved 4 new LEGO idea sets. These are initially fan designs, which will now, over a lengthy process, be turned into official LEGO sets that you can purchase in stores. These fan projects are varied in terms of design and in terms of source material, with some of them borrowing from IPs that have not yet had the LEGO treatment. Commiserations to anybody watching who was among the many entrants that got all the way to this review stage before unfortunately being rejected. The good news is that for these designs, that is not always the end of the story, as there is the opportunity to redesign these, rework these creations, and then resubmit them to go through the process all over again. Sometimes, every now and then, that bears fruit and previously rejected designs are actually approved. In the meantime, these newly approved projects mean that there are now 17 LEGO idea sets at some point in the production process. The nice thing about this theme is that, unlike other LEGO themes, we know exactly what is coming, and we can have a look at the list and we can speculate about what they might one day look like. That said, I do think it is well worth bearing in mind with LEGO ideas that fans are submitting an idea and not a finished product, and so a lot of these sets are going to look drastically different by the time that LEGO designers have finished tweaking them and reworking them to make them commercial products. This feels like an excellent opportunity not just to look at the newly approved projects, but also to go through every single LEGO idea set that is currently in production. What we're going to do here is I'm going to read through the entire list of everything in chronological order, then we're going to look at the brand new approved designs, then we'll look at everything else. So then, as of April 2026, here is every single LEGO idea set currently in production. Sea Serpent, gift with purchase by Hallowed Brick 02. LEGO Godzilla by Matt E720. The X-Files, The Truth Is Out There by Wet Wired. Wallace and Gromit by Pedelium. Build, Paint and Play, gift with purchase by Doomslicer. Vintage Sewing Machine by Brick Stability. E.T. the Extraterrestrial by Lafabrick. La Katrina by Yop1172. Smurf Village by The Half-Blood Baron. Go-Go Power Rangers by Truman Bricks. Ramen by Mick Downton Abbey Highclere Castle by Sebastian Veselka. Urban Face Sketcher, gift with purchase by Archgiant7. Edward Scissorhands by Caster Troy. Amsterdam Canal Houses by Brickmaster_85. National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation Griswold House by Twertoys. And The Old Man and the Sea by Lian Ha. In addition to this, there's been some movement in the LEGO Ideas parking lot. These are projects which are not rejected, but also not yet approved. They're oftentimes ones where there are rights issues, or the LEGO team just have to decide whether or not they are the right fit for the LEGO catalogue at the moment. Unfortunately, Camping Trip by Taroma and Golden Girls by Martin_Studio have been rejected, so these sets are not going to be created. They are not going to be turned into official sets. That is a bit of a disappointment if you like either of these. Anyway, one of those now free spaces in the parking lot was immediately filled by another project, so there are now 2 projects currently in the parking lot. These maybe might be turned into official sets down the line, we do not know yet. The 2 ideas projects currently in the parking lot are Daft Punk Concert by Robot Rock and Lunch Atop a Skyscraper by Dallas Bricks. Let's now turn our attention to the newly approved projects. Because these are very recently added to the production schedule, they are probably the ones that are the furthest away from hitting store shelves. The LEGO Tim Burton collection continues to grow with this gorgeous Edward Scissorhands project designed by Caster Troy. This is one that I feel it is important not to get too attached to, because if you look at it right now from these pictures, it does look like it would not just serve the needs of fans of Tim Burton and of Edward Scissorhands, but also castle fans who want something a little bit gothic and moody and spooky to add to their castle collection. As nice as it looks in these pictures though, do bear in mind LEGO Ideas is all about the idea, so designers are going to rework these. I imagine this one is going to look very different by the time the LEGO designers are finished with it. I can see a lot of the detail here being simplified, I can imagine it shrinking somewhat, and I can imagine there being probably additional details added that are not part of these current renders. That is just the nature of the beast. If you want something where you vote for a fan-created project and then it gets turned into a set that looks almost exactly the same as that early render, you're going to want to look at the Bricklink Designer program instead. That's not what LEGO Ideas does. Even so, there is a lot of potential here. Personally, I would quite like to see the designers playing with the Edward Scissorhands aesthetic as a whole, where you've got this creepy building, but then you've got that juxtaposed with the pastel colours of suburbia. It would be brilliant if they could find some way of bringing that add in. I'm thinking probably mostly with characters rather than adding additional buildings, but even so, it would be cool to have some contrast here, even if by virtue of the source material we're going to end up with a completely grey building. Next up, Amsterdam Canal Houses by Brickmaster_85. And looking at this one, it does suggest that perhaps the Italian Riviera has done quite well for the LEGO group. If that one has sold well, perhaps that has influenced the decision to add this one to the LEGO Ideas catalogue as well. Much like the Italian Riviera, this initial design looks very modular in its construction. It looks like it would slot very nicely alongside a bunch of other modular buildings, either from the Modular Buildings collection or from Marvel or from wherever else we may be pulling. I mean, okay, the inclusion of a canal doesn't quite work with that lineup because you'll have roadside, 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 water, roadside, 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 but still, that shape of the building is very similar, and I can imagine that that's something that might be tweaked. If we look at the Italian Riviera, it went from being very modular in its initial fan project to being something with a slightly more angled, slightly more nuanced, slightly more complicated shape to it, and I can see the same kind of thing happening here. There's no reason to keep it in a square or a rectangle shape. Plus, I do get the vibe that the LEGO group likes to keep LEGO Ideas very separate from the modular building collection. We even see that with the Bricklink Designer program, where even where you get something that can technically fit into a modular lineup, it's still given a slightly different treatment. It opens up slightly differently. Either way, I can see the set proving particularly popular in Amsterdam as a kind of tourist souvenir set, especially when you bear in mind that tourists in Amsterdam often have lower inhibitions than they would normally due to reasons, and therefore might be a bit more eager to spend a lot of money on a LEGO set. Next up, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation Griswold House. I'm going to be completely honest with you, I have absolutely no idea what this is. This is not a Christmas film that we have in the United Kingdom. It is just not on the roster. However, I am familiar with Chevy Chase, I've seen Community, and I've seen the music video for the Paul Simon song You Can Call Me Al. Either way, this looks like an adorable festive house. If the Amsterdam Canal Houses set looks a little bit like it might work in a modular lineup, this one looks like it's going to fit very nicely alongside the Winter Village collection. This one's also going to work very well alongside the Home Alone house, which at this point is one of the oldest serving LEGO Ideas sets that is currently still on shelves. I do also think that that might have had something to do with the decision to approve this one. Looking at these two designs, I do feel like the National Lampoon house is a little bit more visually interesting from the outside. There's more variety of colour, it's less symmetrical than the Home Alone house, and there's more going on in the outside of the building. As I understand it, that's relevant to the film. Something to do with the lights and the ladder are particularly important, but as said, I don't know what this is. Finally, speaking of eye-catching designs, we've got The Old Man and the Sea by Lian Ha. This one is so gorgeous. It is wonderful, and I'm really excited to see how this gets adapted into a LEGO set. I really hope that a lot of this character is kept for this particular set. In particular, I love the colour scheme here. I love the background to the thing where you've got a sunset. I love the waves cresting around the ship. I love the fact that it's all built on top of a book. And while this is ultimately not a pirate set, it feels like it's going to work very well alongside pirate sets. So if we look at all four of these new designs, these newly approved projects, they've all got some kind of link to existing LEGO collections. We've got the pseudo Tim Burton collection, we've got something that looks at the moment like it would fit in with the modular building collection, but will either way fit very well with other buildings. Then you've got something that works with the Winter Village collection and something that works with a collection of pirate sets. In other words, these are all fairly safe choices for the LEGO group because in each of these cases, they know that similar sets have sold well in the past. The same is not necessarily true of every currently in production LEGO Ideas set, but if you look at these, you can definitely see the same kinds of trends appearing time and time again. Take, for example, the project that has been in production for the longest at this point, Sea Serpent by Hallowed Brick 02. It is a ship, and it is a castle set. There are absolutely no prizes for guessing who this particular set is going to appeal to. Just bear in mind, when this thing turns up, it is going to be a gift with purchase set rather than being something that you can buy in stores. And that is maybe going to make this a little bit tricky. I have absolutely no insight whatsoever as to when this might come, but just bear in mind that it may well be on the horizon in the next few months. Lego Godzilla is another one that I can see changing drastically because I think that the build as it is, created by Matt E720, is absolutely beautifully detailed, and I can imagine that a lot of that detail is going to get lost in translation because Lego idea sets can't just go out to the hardest of hardcore Lego fans who are really good at putting things together. They need to go out to a widespread audience of people who may not necessarily have the dexterity, the practice with Lego bricks that are required to put together some of these masterpieces, and they need to be built in such a way that the instructions can be logical and easy to understand. And I think sometimes people do overlook how important that is in the design of a set. It's not just about making something that looks good, it's about making something that feels good to put together. I can also imagine this particular design shrinking somewhat as it is converted, but I do hope that it stays at least somewhat hefty in size, because it would be brilliant to put this thing in with a modular building lineup. It would be great to just have Godzilla towering over the top of, for example, the Jazz Club. Again, I have absolutely no insight whatsoever as to when this set might be coming, but Godzilla Minus Zero is on the horizon. We've had a trailer for this film recently, and so it may well be that this thing turns up at about the same time in order to tie in. Or it might not. It might turn up at a completely different time, who's to say? Either way, that film is coming in November. It would be wise, I think, for the LEGO Group to have this thing on store shelves before then, but we'll have to wait and see. Next up, we have the X-Files set. I think this is another one that could potentially end up being a lot simpler and a lot smaller when it is finally finished, but I do hope that it keeps the structure here because that's such a big part of this design. You've got these different little dioramas that add together to give you a snapshot of what the entire show is about. Wallace and Gromit, this one might be a more straightforward translation because they are just brick-built Wallace and brick-built Gromit, but it is going to be fun to see that. Aardman and the LEGO Group have been working together on an animated short recently. This is very, very cute. I absolutely adore Aardman. I don't know how they just keep getting better and better at the simple art of moving plasticine around and then making it look somehow like it is fluid and alive and full of character and charm. That said, in the collaboration animated short, you definitely see a difference between how expressive the claymation can be versus the movement of the Lego bricks, and so it will be interesting to see whether or not a brick-built Wallace really captures his awkward charm, or whether it will just feel a little bit uncanny valley. Build, Paint and Play by Doomslicer, which by the way, always like a Slicer reference, is a gift with purchase set, so this is not going to be the biggest, most widely available thing of all time. It is an interesting one for the LEGO Group to tackle because the source material is the idea of making miniatures of some variety, whether that's your Gunpla or your Games Workshop Warhammer figures. It's a hobby that overlaps somewhat with Lego, and so it'll be interesting to see that converted into a Lego set. I also wonder if it could be perhaps the start of a talking point between Lego and Games Workshop. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if we eventually got some kind of collaboration there. Vintage Sewing Machine feels to me like one that will work very well alongside, for example, the typewriter, something that is a little bit nostalgic, a little bit retro, something that can have a lot of detail to it and something that can be relatively life-size, although I feel like this one is going to be a bit smaller than an actual vintage sewing machine because those things are big and those things are heavy. E.T. the Extraterrestrial just makes an awful lot of sense. We've already had Gizmo from Gremlins. This one just feels like a logical expansion of that kind of 80s nostalgia vibe, and a final proper Lego treatment for something that turned up in the 80s nostalgia wave of Lego Dimensions. Now I think we're just waiting on the A-Team. Fingers crossed. La Katrina is very, very pretty. This is another one that is going to shrink significantly. The LEGO designers have already confirmed that when they spoke about this thing to us at Fan Media Days last year, because the original fan project is like a meter tall and there's no way they're going to make a set that big. Hopefully though, they'll be able to keep something of the detail here because it is a particularly pretty build. Smurf Village on the one hand feels like a continuation of the same vibe that gave us Tintin because comic characters from Europe, but then on the other side of things, it feels like it's going to work very well with everybody who loves mushroom builds. We've had the Mushroom House and the Mushroom Village from the Bricklink Designer Program, and then this is a more widely available version of that. Go-Go Power Rangers is, I have to admit, the one that I am the most excited for on this list, and I do feel quite guilty about that because I feel like I should be more excited about the homegrown original Lego ideas, but for this particular one, the IP is just so powerful that I can't help but want it. It is similar for me to the Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time set, where it is just something that I have wanted in Lego form for a very, very long time, and so my rational Lego fan brain is overpowered by the part of my brain brain that is devoted to an IP that I fell in love with when I was a child. On the other side of things, we've got this ramen set, which is probably my second most anticipated of all of these projects. I'm genuinely curious how the LEGO Group is going to adapt life-size food in brick-built form. This is not something that we have seen before. There are, I think, some safety concerns around making LEGO bricks look a little bit too delicious, so I'm interested to see whether or not the LEGO Group sticks the landing with this set. Then we've got Downton Abbey Highclere Castle. I feel like this one is going to prove incredibly popular, not just because there are lots and lots of Downton Abbey fans out there, but also because it's a gorgeous, gorgeous looking building, and it's going to have a lot of uses for people who like to collect little buildings and have their own little LEGO city or townscapes. When we have licensed IP sets, especially with LEGO Ideas, these are the ones that I appreciate the most, the ones that, yes, can give us some kind of cool looking IP, but are also just brilliant builds in their own right. And finally, we have a gift with purchase set, Urban Face Sketcher. This one was approved back in January, so it's one of the more recent on this list, and it is something that is going to work very well, again, with people who have their own little cityscapes, if you want to add a little bit of extra character, a little bit of extra detail to one particular segment of your city. I do have a soft spot for this kind of build, something that recreates a scene that we have all seen a million times before in a cute, neat little package. And that is every single LEGO Ideas set that is currently in production. Which of these are you the most excited to get hold of? Let us know in the comments down below, and do all of the rest of the YouTube things. Give this video a thumbs up, hit subscribe and the notification bell. There is an affiliate link in the description or a QR code currently on screen if you're going to be buying anything from the LEGO website in the near future. Just helps to support the channel, doesn't cost you a penny extra. And with that, I say thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.